what I advise people to do, whether it's IFS or brain spotting or hypnotherapy, because you're reliving a lot of these memories, is, if you can, take the next hour off. Or schedule it to where you don't have a lot of demands on your time that day. Where you can take a nap if you need to.
Welcome back to the You Need a Counselor podcast. This is a show presented by Heart and Solutions Counseling Agency. We release new episodes every Sunday at 5 p.m. Central and encourage you to batch up that laundry, put away the dishes, plan for the week ahead, or do any other task that might seem daunting while you give our show a listen. You might just be encouraged to call your therapist, connect with this week's guest, or seek out those services you've been considering for a while but haven't made the commitment to yet. If you are in the state of Iowa and are in need of mental or behavioral health counseling, give us a call at 1-800-531-4236. Enjoy the show.
Hello, and welcome back to the You Need a Counselor podcast. My name is Dr. Julie Johnson. I'm the president and founder here at Heart and Solutions Mental Health Counseling and Behavioral Health Counseling in Iowa.
And I'm Krista Hunt. I am our Vice President in charge of the Behavioral Health Department. And this is our podcast, You Need a Counselor. So we are a podcast designed for people curious about counseling, but have barriers keeping them from experiencing the benefits of counseling. Our mission is to share stories about counseling, good, bad, and indifferent, and spread the message that everyone can benefit from mental health and behavioral health counseling services.
Our guest today joins us from Richmond, Virginia. She is a licensed professional counselor out there in Virginia, also a certified clinical hypnotherapist and a certified brain spotter. We've got Adina Silvestri here with us today. She specializes in internal family systems, working with children and with families, as well as working with women and children. So welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
So can you tell us about internal family systems? What is that? Who hasn't heard of it?
Yes. So it was developed by Dick Schwartz, who was a professor at Harvard, and I'll probably get the dates wrong, so I'll skip that. But basically, it is a model in which there are no bad parts. One of the premises is that everyone has a family system inside their head, and it's made up of protectors, and the protectors are managers and firefighters. So an example of a manager would be over protecting or high achieving or perfectionism. An example of a firefighter would be like reactive behaviors like addiction or eating disorders or self-harm really. And all of that is they come on board and protect, all in service of the exile, which is the young part of us that had accumulated burdens at an early age. And so they don't want that exile to be seen. They want to protect it. And so they come on board with all of these fun behaviors. And, it's my job and the client's job to sort of do a lot of parts mapping and get them just kind of relax a little bit so that we can get to the exile, which isn't the main goal, but it is one of the goals. So yeah.
Can you kind of explain what parts mapping is and how that's done and how people kind of even figure out like what is their inner family system?
Yeah, I would say definitely find a therapist that specializes in IFS. So there are a lot of individuals out there that say that they're certified in it, but that's not the same thing. There's a rigorous 140-hour process to get to actually be certified. And parts mapping is, you're focusing on the part, you're being curious about it, you're identifying it, you're seeing what its job is, you're understanding it, you're giving it a lot of self-energy. And sort of just really getting it to maybe switch jobs to something a little bit more administrative versus something that's kind of ruling your life.
So is that kind of the main goal then, to be able to sublimate some of these different parts into maybe more productive parts for where we are now in our development?
Definitely. That is definitely one of the goals. Yep. And to ultimately lead with self-energy. So you're not heart-led, you're not leading with anxiety and fear and trauma responses. You're leading with curiosity and compassion and calmness and confidence.
How would somebody know to seek out a therapist with this training? Like, how do they know, like, this is something I should work on?
I think everybody should work on IFS. But I'm a little biased. I feel like if you've tried other therapies before and it hasn't worked, I would try internal family systems. It just makes sense. And it's it's non-shaming, non-judgmental. And even if you like your CBT therapist, just try, maybe you start with the book, No Bad Parts, or um, you start with, looking at some videos. But yeah, I feel like everybody needs to try IFS. Again, biased, but it's really, I see a lot of clients that have complex disorders. So I specialize in working with women with substance abuse and eating disorders and men with covert depression. And so this is when they've heard over and over again that they're wrong or these behaviors are bad and then they're bad. This is just such a non-shaming, non-judgmental approach that my clients really love it.
Absolutely. So can you talk us through how some of these parts, maybe the manager or the firefighter, might show up when it comes to substance abuse or when it comes to eating disorders? How are these pieces showing up?
Well, it definitely depends on the person, but maybe an example would be that, when you start to feel that fight or flight sort of go off in your system, then you turn to a drink, or maybe you start to overeat. Maybe, you start to binge on sugar. That would be sort of an example of a firefighter. Or say a manager, you're trying to really control all aspects of your life. It could show up that way as well.
Yeah, definitely. And so you also are certified in hypnotherapy and brain spotting. Can you give us some background on what that is?
Sure. So hypnotherapy is, just like it sounds. We use scripts to sort of identify themes in your life and then reinforce that via post-hypnotic suggestions. And then brain spotting would be that, we have this little wand. You don't need a wand. You could use your finger, but you kind of utilize something in order to look for brain spots in the client's visual field. And so they're sort of flipping from looking at the external world to sort of looking in your internal brain for brain spots, traumatic triggers. So you sort of bypass the frontal lobe and go back to the anterior cingulate cortex, and that's where a lot of the trauma is held. And you sort of process on those spots. Well, you do process on those spots to resolution. So sometimes I use brain spotting with IFS or kind of combine some of them together. And that's, brief introduction to both.
And what led you to be interested in doing hypnotherapy and brain spotting and internal family systems? How did you get here with all your credentialing and information?
Yeah, well, I'm old, so I guess that's part of it. And then also, um, like I said earlier, I work with sort of marginalized populations, and you know, after the 20th SSRI, you start to think, Like, okay, I'm never getting better. Like this is it for me. This is as good as it's gonna get. And so I just started looking for alternative therapies that could help that weren't talk therapy, CBT related, which is what most therapists are trained in grad school. And there's a place for it for sure, but it's not where I want to be. So
Yeah, definitely. And you've since wrote a book as well, Writing Through Grief and Loss, an IFS journal for healing. I'm not super familiar with what an IFS journal even is, so give us some background on what that is and what the book's about as well.
yeah, so I have a writing group called Writing Bravely, and um, it kind of started with my own journey. I realized during the pandemic that I needed community. I was feeling isolated and sort of unmoored, and I started looking into these writing groups, online writing groups, and I decided, well, I'm not going to go to therapy because therapy is kind of scary, but I'm going to try these writing groups. And the writing groups and the output from the writing group was way scarier. And sharing it was way scarier than therapy was ever going to be. Um, and so, since the pandemic, I've sort of just been collecting writing prompts that I've had good outcomes with, that my clients have had good outcomes with, that I've used in my Writing Bravely group, and compile them into seasons. So spring, summer, fall, winter. And I have an IFS meditation that kind of gets you sort of into that mode. So you're starting to do some parts identification, parts mapping, and then it kind of primes you for the writing prompts that are to follow.
So what are some examples of some of the scarier writing prompts that you experienced?
Yeah, I would say one of the scarier writing prompts is I don't remember. You want to set a timer for that one
Yeah.
because a lot's going to come out.
Hmm. Very interesting. What are some other, and so when you're in the writing group, you're writing it yourself and then you're sharing it
Yeah,
with the group and
then
process.
you're sharing it with the group. Yeah.
Mhm. And so both of those pieces can be very helpful with finding insight into ourselves.
Oh, for sure. And there's this amazing chemical cocktail that happens when you're writing and then also sharing in a group because you're feeling that empathy and connection just immediately with these perfect strangers. Uh, yeah, it can be quite powerful.
And the writing can really facilitate that that ability to express the things that our connection has maybe been a little derailed in terms of our ability to express that verbally and in a way that we feel comfortable. And the writing can just really, really help with having that step in between and being able to have control over what it is that we are going to share. If that's a concern for us, some of us have difficulty with trusting what we're going to say. And so public speaking, especially, right? They say more people would rather be in the coffin than doing the eulogy, right? And so
Wow. Yeah.
it's because we don't always have trust in ourselves in terms of what we're going to say and how we're going to express it. And if we feel that we will be understood, or if we feel that we will be supported when we say the thing that we need to express. And so writing can help us do that. It can take away some of those hindrances of what are they going to think, or am I going to say it right? Am I going to stumble on my words? Writing can just really help with that. And then we get control over what we share. And so then when we share with somebody else, we are sharing the pieces that have meaning to us, as opposed to the process of getting there.
Yeah. I would say if anyone is interested in writing, they should look at Dr. James Pennebaker's studies. He has over 1,000 studies on expressive writing. And I mean, it just over and over again, the outcomes are so positive when you're writing through a past traumatic event. There's this cascade of things that happen. And number one is you turn from this victim to this victor. You're telling the story in your words. So it can be very powerful.
Absolutely. Can you tell us more about the kind of that process that goes through? Because there's the writing in the group, and then there's the writing in the journal, right? Those are kind of separate pieces, and then there's just writing to do narrative stuff, right? So those different pieces. How does the journal without a writing group, right? How does somebody use the journal itself?
Hmm. Yeah, well, you can certainly use the journal in a writing group. I'm still in writing groups. I can't get enough of them. And so I use a lot of my prompts to even just get me started. Um, Even if I'd end up not sharing it. But and to answer your question, the I feel like the journal is its own sort of self-therapy. You can choose to share it, you can choose not to share it. You can take it to your therapist and the two of you can review it together. I know I've had a lot of clients do that as well, like just start writing and then bringing it into therapy the next week. I think it's all a process of, sort of self-discovery um, and being able to tell your story. Nobody can take that away from you, you know?
Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned you kind of got into writing and writing groups when COVID happened to kind of help
Yeah.
connect the people. How did you go from like seeking out writing groups to starting your own writing group?
Yeah, I would say, well, number one, I love groups. I have many groups, including a toxic masculinity men's group. So I love groups. So it just sort of made sense that with this new obsession of writing, that I would take that and turn that into a group. And I was already doing it in my men's group as well. We sit down and we write for about 5 to 7 minutes every time we meet. And some of the men do not really like that or me, but they acquiesce. Group pressure. Um, and yeah, so it just was like a natural fit.
What do you love the most about facilitating groups? You just light up when you talk about groups. What do you love about it?
Yeah. Man. I like that. Number one, you're not going to feel like it's one thing for me to say, hey, maybe you should seek out this group for this grief, right? Like, this is a thing that maybe you should do. It's another thing to just sort of be in a group, feel sort of that connection, know that people are traveling down similar paths as you, maybe not exactly, but there's always themes. Um, and I think number one, just that feeling that, you're just not alone. And I think that that's so, yeah, that just really always makes me like feel good when I see that. Um, yeah. And then there are lived experiences that I can't speak to. I'll never be a man. So I'll never be an overachieving man, trying to deal with, the societal pressures of the achieve mindset versus not having a place to just talk about your feelings, because there really isn't a safe place to do that. You've got to be strong here, you've got to be strong there. And so it's nice that, for instance, in the men's group, that they have other men that can talk about that. So
Yeah, definitely. I am curious about the toxic masculinity group. Do men voluntarily join that group or is it like a required group? It's kind of surprising if they choose to.
some of them do voluntarily. I would say all of them voluntarily joined the group. Yeah. Or else I don't think it would have gone on for 5 years like it has. Like they all want to be there, even if some graduate and then new ones come in. Yeah.
And it's a support group or therapeutic group for men who are struggling with the societal pressures that come with a culture that is supported by toxic masculinity. And I think so often it's a great idea for a group. I'm so glad that you're doing it. I'm sure that they benefit quite a bit, because I think that sometimes the results or symptoms or outcomes that come out of a toxically masculine kind of culture, and those expectations that are on people can then turn the enemy into that man that's living through it, right? And following what's expected, when it's not necessarily that man as a human that is, yes, they are maybe having these symptoms, or they are maybe making these choices and saying these things or doing these things, but it gives such a bigger and more holistic view on it to say, no, these men are coping with these pressures that are happening, these messages that they're getting on how they need to be in order to survive in this world. And so I think the idea that no, if you're a man, you're not the enemy, right? When we say toxic masculinity, I think so many times men feel like we're talking about them, right, as people, and we're not. We're talking about the challenges that men can come to face, and the outcomes of those challenges when they're processing it.
Hmm.
So you do a lot of writing. You've written for the American Counseling Association. You've done a lot of writing and publication as well. And can you tell us about kind of the differences between when you write professionally, right? Because a lot of people, when we think about writing, we think about authors and our favorite, mystery series.
Yeah.
But writing in a journal like this in an intentional way, or writing in a therapeutic group, can have such a different feeling. Can you kind of speak to the difference, since you do a lot of both?
Yeah. Well, I think for me, when I'm writing as if I'm writing to my best friend, and that nobody else is going to read it. No, that's not true, because my clients unfortunately read everything I write. But I think that helps sort of take off the masks that we have to wear as professionals, because when I'm writing in a professional journal, or um, I know I've written in books that my professors have published. It's very academic, and so um, straight-laced, and yeah, not a lot of personality.
What are some of the topics you've written about for like the Dr. Oz show that people can look up those articles?
Oh, yeah. Um, you're taking me back. Let's see.
Or any of the publications?
Yeah, I'm for the Dr. Oz show, it was how to talk to your kids about drug abuse. For the American Counseling Association, I had a weekly blog, so you name it, and I wrote about it. Um, what else? For my former professor, he published a book on 101 counseling jobs, and I wrote about my first couple of years in private practice and the roller coaster that was. So, um, shout out Dr. Hodges. I'm working on something right now for the American Counseling Association on the secret lives of men. So it's going to be an ode basically to my men's group. So I'm really excited about that. Yeah.
Absolutely. So what are some of the challenges that you find that clients might have when they think about starting internal family systems, or they think about starting uh, therapy in general with you, doing brain spotting, things that they may not have heard of before, they may not
Mhm.
understand. What are some of those challenges or barriers that you see? And then what are some of the things that you find to be helpful?
I feel like once they've made the appointment, there really aren't any barriers, other than how quickly can you help me? Like, when am I going to see some results, Adina? Uh, and I do intensives, which are like they're like 20-hour sessions. And so you do end up seeing results very quickly because that's a lot of hours. Um, so maybe when we're in it, there could be, sort of the parts might be sort of angry, right? Because you're going through a lot of emotions. And so really that could be the only thing. So, what I advise people to do, whether it's IFS or brain spotting or hypnotherapy, because you're reliving a lot of these memories, is, if you can, take the next hour off. Or schedule it to where you don't have a lot of demands on your time that day. Where you can take a nap if you need to. I would say that would maybe be the biggest thing.
Yeah, definitely. Especially after a 20-hour intensive, that would be a lot, I'm sure, at one time.
Oh, it's not at one time.
Oh, it's just like,
Yeah, no,
okay.
It's not. It's like 3 hours one day and then 2 hours, maybe 48 hours later.
Okay. So just kind of like a lot in a row, basically, then.
Yeah.
Sense. Well, great. Can you give us some more info then on where people can find your book? And then I know you mentioned to us before the episode that you have a book event coming in January, a little more detail on that and what people can expect from that.
Yeah, so the IFS journal, Writing Through Grief and Loss, you can find that at it's a tiny URL. So it would be tinyurl.com/IFS journal. And the book event is going to be January 18th, Saturday. And it's going to be some grounding meditation, some writing prompts, goal setting. The theme is going to be new beginnings. So we're sort of rewriting the chapter for the new year, and sort of how you can continue with the writing practice as you go. So it'll be set up kind of like a group, which, as I've mentioned, is sort of my favorite thing to do. So
it'll be an interactive experience. People can come and
yeah, it'll be very interactive. It's Saturday the 18th at 1. I don't know if I said that. It's at 1 o'clock, and it's at Book People Bookstore, and that's in Richmond, Virginia.
Awesome. And it looks like you can get a free sample of the Journal for Healing on your website. What can people expect if they go to the website and get that free sample? What's in there for them?
Yeah, it's a little bit of my background, why I started the journal, what I sort of the map as far as recommendations to utilize it, how to utilize it. And then I believe we go through a whole season. I believe we go through all of winter. So you'll get all the prompts for winter plus the IFS meditation as well.
Great. So if you could give a suggestion to somebody who might be on the fence about starting counseling, what suggestion might you give that person?
I would say that you have to want it, right? So the motivation needs to be there. So if you're starting to think about it, maybe reach out to a couple of therapists that you think might be a good fit, because the therapeutic alliance is very important. So many studies that are out that allude to that. And yeah, just make sure that you have the space for it as well, because there is going to be a lot of healing, and there's going to be a lot of thinking about past memories and events, and yeah, maybe those two things.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It was great to meet you.
I am Dr. Adina Silvestri, and I need a counselor.
Awesome. And I'm Krista Hunt.
And I'm Julie Johnson, and we need a counselor.
And so do you.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the You Need a Counselor podcast. We are so grateful that you're here. Now, we want to hear from you. Text us or give us a call at 515-650-3231. You can also find and connect with You Need a Counselor on Facebook and Instagram. If you've enjoyed today's show, please take a moment to like, review, or leave a comment, as all of these things help others to find and benefit from the podcast as well. If you're in the state of Iowa and interested in mental health counseling or behavioral health intervention services, give us a call at 800-531-4236.